General Ben Hodges, formerly in charge of all the American troops in Europe, welcome to our show this morning. Hello.
Good morning.
First of all, as all of us are reading the news coming out of the White House, out of Washington, everything that the Trump administration is doing, how do you wake up every morning?
Well, almost every morning I wake up in anticipation of some strange new development or some bizarre thing that's come out of the White House that damages our image in the world, damages relationships with our allies, or shows that somehow this administration has sided with the Kremlin, which, you know, in my decades of serving as a soldier, I never would have dreamed.
Let's cover the ground. First of all, last couple of days, Vice President Vance and his wife were visiting Greenland. Denmark is furious. What do you make of this visit? Is this serious? That is the U.S. planning to take over a part of Greenland?
Well, there's three things here. Number one, this is the most ridiculous, unprovoked aggression towards an ally, towards anybody that I could imagine. I mean, the Danes and the Greenlanders have said many times that we were welcome to come to help develop the mineral resources there, as well as to grow the size of our military base that's there. So, I mean, we're pushing against the open door. So I don't understand what this is all about. And frankly, the administration has not bothered to explain to anybody why all of a sudden, you know, we need to take this kind of action. The second thing is, of course, I hope that senior military leadership in the Pentagon is pushing back against this, that this would be an illegal order to invade a treaty ally. I mean, so this is going to be a test for the courage of moral courage of our senior military officials to tell the secretary, to tell the president, this would be an illegal order. And then the third part of this, I was in Copenhagen back on Wednesday and met with some members of the Danish parliament, and they are just in disbelief. What is going on? How can an ally? And of course, they were very hurt by what Vice President said. The Vice President said that Denmark was a bad ally. I mean, Denmark lost more soldiers fighting alongside us per capita than almost anybody else. So this has caused real damage.
Yeah. Talking about moral courage, the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, was sitting next to President Trump in the Oval Office when Trump said, I think the annexation of Greenland will happen. He didn't protest, the Secretary General. It's one of his members. What should he have done?
Well, of course, what I don't know is what the Secretary General might have said off camera. The Secretary General has a huge responsibility to keep the alliance together, the way his predecessor did, Jens Stoltenberg. And that means figuring out how do you prevent President Trump from doing things that are irreparable. I wish, of course, I would have loved it if the Secretary General Rutte had said, Mr. President, that's you're talking about an ally. That would be illegal as well as damaging for all of us. But again, I don't know what he might have said off camera.
Right. Do you think that Article 5 is still in place? So if a NATO ally is being attacked by somebody else, in this case, that could be another NATO ally, the US, will we defend Greenland and Denmark?
Well, this would be very important that all the other members of the alliance would make it clear that they would protect their ally, Denmark. Now, of course, as you and your listeners know, the Article 5 is ultimately a political decision. And the decision to invoke Article 5 would require everybody in the alliance to agree to it. And that's only happened once. And of course, that was after 9/11 when the United States was attacked and all of our allies, including the Netherlands and Denmark, came to our aid. You know, this is part of the bizarreness of this situation. The president himself has cast doubt on whether or not the United States would live up to Article 5 when he was asked during the visit of Prime Minister Starmer back a couple of weeks ago. This should be the easiest yes answer for any president to say, yes, of course, the United States will live up to Article 5 obligations. The fact that he even hesitated shows a crack. So hopefully and I am starting to see this, by the way, Republicans leadership in the Congress are finally starting to stand up and push back a little bit. And I hope that this will help contain some of this damage.
Do you think that Europe can play ball, the member states of NATO, and step up the plate and be in the position that the US seems to be leaving now in NATO?
Number one, yes. When you look at the combined economies, the combined populations, the combined military forces of all of the nations of Europe, plus Canada, and of course, including UK, it dwarfs Russia. I mean, in almost every category except nuclear weapons. So, yes, the Allies over time could make up for much of what the United States might withdraw in some extreme case where the United States is no longer a part of the alliance. But look, this president and every one of his predecessors has told our allies, you are going to have to accept more responsibility for the defense of Europe because we, the United States, do not have the capability to do everything, to protect everyone's strategic interests, to be responsible for freedom of navigation for everybody around the world. And so this is why we have always asked allies to do more. And so as this administration shifts its priority towards the Indo-Pacific region, there is going to be a requirement for Europe to do more. But the Europeans, frankly, have not lived up to what they said they would do. It's not because they don't have the capability. It's because they have not summoned the political will to do that. And frankly, I wish they would quit whining so much about the U.S. and instead focus on protecting their people, their strategic interests, and working together to prevent Russia from any further aggression.
Stop whining and get more confidence?
Yeah, that's the only thing that the Europeans lack is self-confidence. You don't need a U.S. backstop. You need self-confidence. And I think I have more confidence in Europe than most Europeans do.
Right. Lots has been said last week about the scoop of the Atlantic on the Signal leak. And everybody has heard the story about how all this information on the Houthis, the attack on the Houthis, was sent to a journalist as well. Now, just in short, what do you make of this situation? How dangerous is it, and could it happen again?
Well, it probably has happened several times already. I mean, they were so casual in this conversation, the one that was leaked to the Atlantic, tells me that this has been the norm for some time. And so our adversaries will be able to go back and mine information and learn more about procedures and who does what. So this is a serious open wound, if you will. And I don't think it's something that they'll automatically fix right away, especially when you fail to accept responsibility and acknowledge that it was a mistake. That actually prevents organizations and people from correcting the obvious mistakes. Frankly, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, the Director of National Intelligence, all of these people should be fired or they should resign because these are such obvious violations. And instead, they have lied about, in front of Congress, they have lied about what actually happened. The fact is, you should never even acknowledge that an operation is underway or about to happen publicly. You should never talk about targets or weapons platforms, anything that puts our pilots at risk or which would give an adversary any sort of advance warning. So this is incompetence, but also arrogance. I mean, 3 of these people are former Army officers, which means, Tulsi Gabbard, Mr. Hegseth, Pete Hegseth, and Mr. Waltz, all were Army officers, which means they would have been trained. They knew how to handle classified information, and either they were so arrogant that they assumed this no longer applied to them, or they just are incompetent.
Ben Hodges, you started this interview with the fact that President Trump is aligning himself with the Russian President Putin, and we in Europe wonder what is going on there between the two of them. Do you think that he is helping Putin to capture part or all of Ukraine? How dangerous is the situation? What is happening there?
Well, this does absolutely zero to advance America's strategic interests. So I don't know what the true motivation is behind this. There are a lot of people speculating that this is some sort of a deal, or that the Russians have some sort of leverage over the administration. But there's too many people in the administration that are supportive of this for me to think that this is a personal kind of thing. So I do believe that there is a part of the administration, and actually a part of the right in the United States, that does not like being in an alliance, that does not like having to work with other nations, and instead would prefer to have a sphere of influence like in the 18th century. So, I mean, when you think about what the president says and his team, when they talk about, Canada and Greenland and Panama, that somehow this would be the American sphere, the Russians would have this part, and the Chinese would have this part. They don't say it quite like that, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Last question, Ben. A very short answer, please. You are an American former general living in Frankfurt, in Europe. How difficult is it to be in that position with everything that is happening and coming out of the Trump presidency?
It's embarrassing, and it's hard for all of my neighbors here to understand what has happened to the United States.
Ben Hodges in Frankfurt, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for the privilege.
Bedankt voor het kijken. Vond je dit een goed gesprek? Vergeet je vooral niet te abonneren, een like of een comment achter te laten. Dat kan natuurlijk ook.
En het zou heel goed kunnen zijn dat nu Amerikaanse delegaties niet meer aan tafel zitten in de jaarlijkse klimaattoppen. Dat er misschien wel veel meer mogelijk is, omdat China en Europa eigenlijk op het vlak van verduurzaming en klimaataanpak veel meer op een lijn zitten dan met de Amerikanen.